They call it wealth management. I call it babysitting $14 billion in assets, 300 institutional accounts, and the financial nervous system that keeps pension funds solvent and endowments funded across the Eastern Seaboard. My name is Patricia. For 23 years, I've been the invisible backbone holding Meridian Capital Partners together. You don't know me, but if your grandmother's retirement check cleared, if your university's scholarship fund grew, or if your city's infrastructure bonds paid out on schedule, I'm the reason it happened. I'm the Senior Portfolio Compliance Officer, which is corporate speak for the woman who knows where every financial body is buried and has the regulatory filings in her safe. I don't have a corner office with a view of the harbor. I have a cubicle that smells like stale tea and copy machine toner, buried deep in the compliance wing of the building. And I like it that way. The quiet allows me to hear the hum of the markets. I know when a currency fluctuation in Tokyo is going to impact our emerging markets fund 3 days before the traders even see the trend. I know which broker-dealers are padding their commissions and which ones will execute a trade at 2 a.m. because I helped their compliance team through an SEC audit in 2011. But let's get one thing straight before I tell you how I brought this place to its knees. I didn't want to be a hero. I just wanted to do my damn job. Hey, real quick, before I get into the blood and guts of how I took down a $4 billion investment empire with a single email, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button and upvote this story. It helps the algorithm know you like watching financial train wrecks in slow motion. Thanks. Now, back to the carnage. The problem started, as it always does, with a transition. Old man Whitmore, the founder, didn't die, but he retired to a villa in the south of France that probably cost more than the GDP of a small island nation. He was a bastard, sure, but he was a bastard who understood fiduciary duty. We respected each other. We had an understanding. I kept his funds compliant, and he kept the bonuses flowing. Then came Sebastian Whitmore, 31 years old, MBA from a school his daddy funded a trading floor simulator to get him into. Teeth so white they looked like they'd been bleached by a team of professionals. He walked into the CEO's office wearing a Brioni suit that cost more than my car, smelling like bergamot and unearned confidence. He didn't know a derivative from a deductible, but suddenly he was the captain of the ship. His first week, he installed a wine bar in the conference room. His second week, he fired the entire research department to outsource to an algorithm, which meant the fund recommendations started contradicting each other within 48 hours. By month 3, he was walking around the floor with a woman named Tiffany, who was apparently our new director of client experience or relationship architect, or whatever title you give your mistress to get her on the payroll. I kept my head down. I'm a professional. I've survived the 2008 crash, the flash crash of 2010, and a wire fraud attempt that required me to manually reconcile 12,000 transactions using paper ledgers and a calculator. I could survive Sebastian, or so I thought. The friction wasn't immediate. It was a slow grind, like margin erosion, that eventually bankrupts the portfolio. Sebastian didn't like me. I was legacy. I was analog. I was a middle-aged woman in a blazer who refused to use the trading app because I preferred to read the actual prospectuses and verify the numbers myself. To him, I was overhead. To me, he was a day trader on a pension fund, flashy, reckless, and completely useless when the market actually crashed. I remember the day the dynamic shifted. It was a Thursday. I was deep in the numbers, finalizing a massive compliance filing for the quarterly SEC report. These documents are critical. They cover $800 million in managed assets. One wrong decimal, and we're facing regulatory sanctions that could freeze client withdrawals for months. I had been on the phone with our external auditor for 6 hours, reconciling discrepancies in the municipal bond allocations that could make or break our fiduciary certification. Sebastian breezed by my desk, Tiffany trailing behind him like a yacht tender following the main vessel. "Patricia," he said, not stopping, just tossing the words over his shoulder like a stock tip. "We need to talk about your workspace. It's cluttered. Bad optics for the high net worth clients." My desk was covered in regulatory filings, account statements, and legal pads covered in my meticulous handwriting. It was the compliance backbone of the company. I'm in the middle of the SEC quarterly. Sebastian, I said, covering the receiver. If I miss the deadline, you lose the ability to accept new institutional money. He stopped. He turned around, giving me that pitying smile people give to legacy systems they're about to replace. We have software for that now. Patricia, he said, move it to the cloud and seriously, lose the paper. It's not very modern wealth. He walked away. Tiffany giggled. The auditor was still on the line. Everything all right? Pat, she asked. Fine, I said, lighting a mental cigarette because I quit the real ones 12 years ago. And God, did I miss them. Just a minor discrepancy in the org chart. Now, about that ERISA allocation variance, I saved the filing, I saved the certification. The company managed $700 million in new institutional assets that quarter without a single regulatory flag. Did I get a thank you? No. I got an email from HR about the clean desk policy, but the breaking point wasn't work. It never is. It's always the personal disrespect that lights the fuse. It was early December. Year-end was approaching. Tax loss harvesting, annual rebalancing, mandatory distributions. Everything was moving at once. I was working 16-hour days, fueled by antacids and spite. Then the email landed. Subject mandatory attendance. Celebrating visionary leadership. It was an invitation to Sebastian's birthday party. Join us this Saturday at the Whitmore Estate for an evening of sophistication, celebration, and champagne as we honor our CEO, Sebastian Whitmore, on his 32nd year of excellence. Attendance is mandatory for all senior management. Saturday, the Saturday of the annual fund reconciliation. The day our external auditors would be on site to verify the year-end positions. The day I had to personally certify the accuracy of $14 billion in client assets because our accounting system had a known calculation error that I'd been correcting manually for 4 years. The day that if anything went wrong, every pension fund and university endowment using our services would see discrepancies in their annual reports. I looked at the invitation. It was printed on heavy linen stock with embossed gold lettering. It probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I hit reply. Sebastian, happy early birthday. Unfortunately, I cannot attend. I have the annual fund certification scheduled for Saturday. It requires on-site presence due to the regulatory nature of the verification. Have a drink for me. Regards. Patricia. I thought that was it. Professional, polite, reasonable. I was wrong. The next morning, the office felt different. You know that feeling when the market opens with a gap down and you know something terrible has happened overnight. The air was heavy. The Bloomberg terminals were too quiet. People were looking at me, then looking away. I sat down, booted up my workstation, and took a sip of my lukewarm tea. My login failed. Access denied. That's strange. I thought. I typed it again. Access denied. I was reaching for the phone to call IT when I heard the click of heels and the squeak of Italian leather shoes. Patricia. Sebastian's voice boomed. He wasn't smiling today. I spun my chair around. There he was, flanked by Tiffany, holding a leather portfolio like a decorative prop, and 2 security officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Is the network down? I asked, though deep in my gut, right where the ulcer was starting to form. I knew the answer. We're making some changes. Patricia, Sebastian said. He adjusted his cufflinks. They were platinum, monogrammed, power accessories for a man with no power. We're pivoting to a more dynamic leadership structure. Your refusal to integrate with the team culture, he paused. Referencing the party without saying it was the final indicator. You're not a culture fit. I stared at him. The silence stretched out like a margin call that keeps getting worse. You're firing me, I stated flatly. Because I'm working this Saturday instead of watching you drink vintage champagne. It's about alignment, Tiffany chimed in. Her voice was high and practiced. We need people who resonate with our vision of modern wealth. I looked at Tiffany. I looked at Sebastian. I looked at the security officers. Sebastian, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I manage the compliance relationships for 400 institutional clients. I am the authorized signatory for the SEC filings, the FINRA certifications, and the DOL reporting requirements. If I leave, those relationships don't just transfer to an algorithm, they are the regulatory foundation. Sebastian laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. Everyone is replaceable. Patricia, that's Business 101. Now, hand over your credentials. Security will escort you out. I looked at my desk. The regulatory filings, the account reconciliations, the little framed photo of my dog, Chester. I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't sweep the papers off the desk. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my plastic ID badge, and dropped it into Sebastian's outstretched hand. Okay, I said. Sebastian looked disappointed. He wanted a scene. He wanted me to beg. He wanted to feel like the bold disruptor eliminating the old guard. Tell your father I said good luck, I added. My father is in France, Sebastian sneered. He doesn't concern himself with the staff. He will, I said. I grabbed my purse. I grabbed the picture of Chester. And I walked out. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off the sight of Sebastian's smug face, I checked my watch. It was 9:18 a.m. By 9:45 a.m., the first compliance flag would start appearing in the regulatory monitoring system, and by 10:30 a.m., the entire Meridian Capital Partners network was going to start realizing that the foundation had just been pulled out from under the building. I wasn't just the staff, I was the kill switch, and I had just been triggered. The air outside the office building smelled like exhaust and winter cold. It was a gray morning, the kind that seeps into your balance sheets. But for the first time in 18 years, I didn't feel the chill. I felt light. I walked across the parking lot to my 2019 Lexus ES. It had a small dent in the door from a parking garage incident I witnessed 2 years ago. I tossed my purse and the picture of Chester onto the passenger seat. I didn't start the car immediately. Instead, I sat there, listening to the sleet tap against the roof. Most people, when they get fired after 2 decades of service, they panic. They worry about the mortgage. They worry about health insurance. They worry about their professional licenses. And sure, a part of me was doing that math. I'm a single woman in my 50s. The job market isn't exactly begging for people who know how to manually calculate ERISA compliance from 2004. But another part of me, the part that had dealt with market crashes, regulatory investigations, and panicked institutional clients, was already moving into crisis management mode, except this time, I wasn't managing the crisis for Meridian. I was the crisis. I pulled out my phone. It was my personal cell, thank God. I've always kept a firewall between my life and the company's property. I opened my email app, not the company email. My access there was cut the second Sebastian smirked. But my personal Gmail, the address I had given to every major institutional client, every regulatory contact, and every external auditor over the last 2 decades. Not for official business, but for emergencies. Call me here if the regulators come knocking. I used to tell them, well, I struck the match. Now it was time to watch it burn. I didn't send a mass blast. That's amateur hour. That looks like sabotage. No, I needed to be compliant. Maliciously, beautifully compliant. I typed out a draft. Subject, Notice of Change in Authorized Certification. To whom it may concern. Effective immediately. I, Patricia Thornton, am no longer employed by Meridian Capital Partners. As such, I am no longer the authorized signatory or point of contact for any active compliance certifications, regulatory filings, or fiduciary verifications, per Section 8.3 of our Standard Institutional Service Agreement. Key compliance personnel, Continuity. Please be advised that my departure may trigger an automatic review or suspension of certification status pending the appointment of a qualified successor. Please direct all future regulatory matters to Sebastian Whitmore, CEO. Best regards, Patricia. I read it over. It was dry. It was factual. It was legally bulletproof. Section 8.3. That was the magic bullet. See, years ago, when Meridian was expanding aggressively, our institutional clients were nervous about regulatory risk. Pension funds can't afford compliance failures. University endowments answer to boards of trustees to soothe them. Old man Whitmore had me insert a clause into our major contracts. It basically said that if the key compliance personnel, me, who held the regulatory certifications, left the company, the client had the right to immediately pause new investments or demand an independent audit until they vetted the new compliance team. It was a trust clause. They trusted me, not the firm. Sebastian didn't know about Section 8.3. Sebastian probably thought a fiduciary duty was a type of bond. I hit send on the first email, then the second, then the third. I went down the list alphabetically. ABC, Allegheny Teachers Pension Fund, sent. Boston University Endowment, sent. California Municipal Retirement System, sent. I sat there for 30 minutes just hitting send. It was rhythmic, therapeutic, like balancing a ledger, but every entry cost Meridian $100,000 in emergency audit fees. My phone buzzed. It was Frank from the Allegheny Pension Fund. Patricia, what the hell is this email? His voice rumbled through the speaker. I just got a bounce back from your work address saying user unknown. I'm out. Frank, I said, leaning back in my seat. Sebastian let me go this morning. Culture fit. Culture fit. Frank laughed, a gruff, incredulous sound. Does he know the annual certification isn't even filed yet? We're supposed to present to our board next week. He doesn't seem to think it matters. Frank. He thinks the software handles it. Software don't sit across from my board members and explain the allocation strategy, Frank grumbled. So, who's handling the ERISA verification for the quarterly distribution that requires a certified signature? If my fund doesn't have the documentation signed by an authorized compliance officer, that would be Sebastian, I said. Or maybe Tiffany. She resonates with the vision of modern wealth. Frank. I'm sure she can resonate the ERISA forms through. Yeah, I don't think so, Frank said. I ain't risking my pensioners. If you ain't signing off. The distributions pause. Section 8.3, right Section 8.3, I confirmed. Strict adherence to fiduciary protocols. You got it. Pat. Funds are freezing. Enjoy your day off. The line went dead. I smiled. One domino down. I started the car and drove out of the lot. As I turned onto the main road, I passed a line of luxury cars heading toward the financial district. They looked so important. Those black sedans with the tinted windows. The executives inside had no idea that in about an hour, their client statements were going to start showing pending flags because the custodian bank, Richard from State Street, whom I sent a holiday basket to every year, was about to read my email. I didn't go home. I couldn't sit in my apartment and stare at the walls. I needed a command post. I drove to the Cornerstone, a quiet bistro about 3 miles away. It was a financial district institution, white tablecloths, discreet booths, and a bar where deals were closed. It was perfect. I walked in. The hostess, Marie, nodded at me. She knew me. I'd spent many late nights here during audit seasons. Your usual table, Patricia keep the corner booth, Marie, and bring me a pot of Earl Grey. I set up my laptop on the marble table. My phone started buzzing, again and again and again. Incoming call. Morgan Stanley Custody Services. Incoming call. FINRA Compliance Hotline. Incoming call. Sebastian Whitmore Work. I stared at Sebastian's name dancing on the screen. I let it ring. He called again immediately. I let it ring again. I took a sip of the tea. It tasted like freedom. I opened a new tab on my browser. I wasn't done yet. I had notified the clients. Now I needed to notify the competitors, but not yet. That was too aggressive. First, I needed to let Sebastian sweat. I needed him to feel the silence of the compliance dashboard showing red flags and the chaos of the phones ringing off the hook. I looked at the clock, 11:45 a.m. At 12:00 p.m., the daily investment committee meeting was scheduled to happen. Usually, I presented the compliance overview. I would tell the portfolio managers which trades were approved, which allocations needed review, and which transactions were flagged for regulatory scrutiny. Today, Tiffany would be presenting. I imagined Tiffany standing in front of a room full of seasoned portfolio managers, holding her leather portfolio, trying to explain why half the institutional accounts were showing pending compliance status and why the custodian banks were demanding to speak to a Patricia. "Sorry, gentlemen," I whispered to the empty bistro booth. "The vision of modern wealth is about to get very blurry." Then a text message popped up, not from a client, from Linda, the executive assistant. She was a good egg, quiet, efficient, made excellent recommendations for client gifts. Linda Patricia. "OMG, are you gone?" "Sebastian is screaming in the conference room. He says you sabotaged the accounts. He can't access the certification portal." I chuckled. I didn't sabotage anything. I just had the regulatory authentication tied to my personal security token because the compliance system, which was managed by a third-party vendor in Delaware, had configured it that way 6 years ago and never updated it. I texted back. "I didn't touch the accounts. Linda, but tell him the authentication token expires in 45 seconds. He might want to hurry. I didn't send him the token code. I just took a bite of my croissant." The war had begun, and I held the keys to the vault. The bistro was filling up with the lunch crowd. Investment bankers, lawyers, executives with names like Bradford and Montgomery wearing bespoke suits. It was a symphony of clinking glasses and whispered negotiations. In the middle of it, I was the conductor of a silent orchestra of financial disaster. My laptop screen was a dashboard of my own making. I had a regulatory status page open, publicly available, by the way, monitoring the compliance status of major investment firms. Yellow warning indicators were appearing next to Meridian's name. A yellow indicator meant pending verification for more than 24 hours. There was a cluster of yellow warnings forming around the institutional custody accounts. That would be State Street pausing their clearing services. The quarterly certification I usually filed manually because the automated system had a known error with our specific fund structure was probably failing validation right now. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was 617. "Boston? Text Ms. Thornton. This is Harrison, legal counsel for Boston University Endowment. Our account is showing a compliance hold. Your office is unresponsive. Are we in breach or are you?" I typed back, "Mr. Harrison. I am no longer with Meridian. Please refer to Section 8.3 of your service agreement. I cannot authorize account access. Good luck." 3 minutes later, another yellow indicator appeared on the regulatory dashboard. Boston University Endowment. Compliance review pending. It was working. The system wasn't crashing. It was freezing. It was a safety mechanism, like when a bank triggers a fraud hold to protect the depositors. The clients were protecting themselves because the guarantor of their regulatory compliance, me, was gone. I ordered a refill on the tea. Marie poured it with practiced elegance. "You look like you're orchestrating a hostile takeover," she said, eyeing my laptop. "Better." "Marie," I said, "I'm auditing one at 1:15 p.m. My phone rang. It wasn't Sebastian this time. It was the frantic, breathless voice of Tiffany. I debated not answering, but curiosity is a vice, and I'm a sinner. "This is Patricia," I answered, my voice professional, calm, the voice of a woman who isn't currently watching a firm implode. "Patricia," Tiffany shrieked. She sounded like she was crying or hyperventilating. "You have to give us the access codes." The clients are calling. The regulators are calling. Everything is showing holds. Tiffany, I said gently, I don't have the access codes. They're in the compliance vault. We can't get into the vault. It keeps asking for authentication from your token. Ah, I said, that's the two-factor verification. Security protocol, very important for regulatory integrity. Well, give me the code, she screamed. I can't. Tiffany, I'm a civilian now. Sharing security credentials with unauthorized personnel is a violation of SC custody rules. I could lose my license. You wouldn't want that, would you? There was a silence on the other end. A stunned, baffled silence. But Sebastian says you're holding the accounts hostage. Sebastian fired me. Tiffany, effective immediately. That means my authorization is revoked. If I give you those codes, I'm technically committing securities fraud. I won't break the law for a firm I don't work for. I'm putting you on speaker, she hissed. Patricia, it was Sebastian. His voice was tight, strained. The arrogance was cracked, leaking panic. Stop playing games. Give us the codes or I'm suing you for breach of fiduciary duty. Sebastian, I said, leaning back, you fired me for culture fit. You said I was replaceable. Surely your dynamic leadership team can figure out how to reset authentication with your compliance vendor. We called them. They said the account administrator has to authorize the reset. That's you. Sounds like a flaw in your org chart. I said, I'd suggest you call the vendor's emergency line. It costs $5,000 per incident, but they can override it in, maybe 72 hours. 72 hours, Sebastian exploded. We have the quarterly distributions due in 2 days. The pension funds will miss their payments. Pension distributions? Right. That's tricky. You need the ERISA certification signed. Did you file the quarterly allocation report I usually do, that manually, because the automated system miscalculates the beneficiary ratios? I heard a crash. It sounded like someone throwing a crystal paperweight. Fix it. Patricia, come back in. Fix it, and maybe we won't sue you. Are you offering me my job back? I asked. I'm offering you a chance to not be destroyed, he yelled. No thanks, I said. I'm busy. I'm reorganizing my investment portfolio. Diversification, very important for risk management. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had just hung up on the CEO of a $4 billion firm. I looked at the status page. More yellow indicators. A cluster around the retirement accounts now. The pension distributions. I felt a twinge of guilt. Not for Sebastian, but for the retirees, the teachers and firefighters who depended on those checks arriving on time. They were the innocent beneficiaries here. I opened my contact list. I found the number for Midwest Martha, the administrator at the largest teachers' pension fund in our client roster who I'd helped through 3 bear markets. I texted her. Martha, it's Patricia. I'm out. The kid is driving the fund off a cliff. The distributions are going to show pending. Don't let your retirees panic. Tell them to set up direct deposit from the backup custodian. I configured it 3 years ago as a failsafe. It's already authorized. Martha texted back instantly. Roger that. Compliance queen. I heard the news. We got you. Screw the kid. We'll protect the retirees. But we ain't processing through Meridian until you say so. I smiled. The retirees were safe. The pension checks would clear. Sebastian was screwed. I realized then that I wasn't just unemployed. I was a free agent, and my currency was trust. I closed the laptop. The bistro crowd was thinning. I needed to make a move. Sitting here was reactive. I needed to be proactive. I thought about who stood to gain the most from Meridian's collapse. Sterling Wealth Advisors. Our biggest competitor. Their managing director, a shark named Victoria Blackwood, had been trying to recruit me for a decade. I always said no out of loyalty to Old Man Whitmore. Loyalty is a two-way street, and Sebastian had just demolished it. I picked up my phone. I dialed Victoria's number. She answered on the second ring. Patricia Thornton. Her smooth voice purred. What do I owe the pleasure? Did you finally get tired of babysitting trust fund babies for peanuts? I'm free, Victoria, I said. Free. Fired this morning. There was a pause, a thoughtful, expensive pause. Where are you? She asked. At the Cornerstone on Financial Row. Stay there, Victoria said. I'm sending a car. We have lunch and we talk about the future. Victoria. I said, one thing. Yes, I'm not coming alone. I'm bringing the Allegheny Pension Fund, the California Municipal Retirement System, and the State Street custody relationship with me. I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. I'll send the Bentley, she said. A black Continental pulled up to a financial district bistro. It stuck out like a blue-chip stock in a pile of penny shares. The driver, a gentleman who looked like he moonlighted as a diplomat, opened the door for me. I grabbed my worn leather briefcase. Marie behind the hostess stand raised an eyebrow. Moving up in the world, Patricia. Just a different kind of portfolio. Marie, I said. I slid into the back seat. It smelled like aged leather and old money. As we glided through the city, heading toward the uptown financial district, I checked the news on my phone. Nothing on the major outlets yet. Wealth management is boring until it implodes, but the industry publications were lighting up. Financial Times headline, Meridian Capital reports. Major compliance disruption. Client funds frozen. Institutional investor, who is Patricia Thornton? Why pension funds are refusing to clear through Meridian. I almost laughed. I was trending in the most prestigious corner of the financial press. I was a legend. My phone vibrated. A voicemail. It was from my mother. Linda, the executive assistant, must have called the family emergency line. Patricia. My mom's voice quavered. Father O'Brien heard you were fired. We're praying for you. Also, your brother wants to know if you can still get him that introduction to the hedge fund manager. Call me. I rubbed my temples. Even in the apocalypse, Brother David needs his networking connections. We arrived at the Criterion, a private dining club uptown where the members wear custom suits and the initiation fee exceeds most annual salaries. Victoria Blackwood was waiting in a private room. She looked like a Bond villain who decided to go into asset management instead of world domination. Perfectly tailored Chanel, pearls that probably cost more than a car, eyes that calculated returns in real time. Patricia, she stood, offering a hand. You look energized. I look like I've been liquidated. Victoria, I said, sitting down. Let's cut the pretense. You know what's happening. I do. She nodded, signaling the waiter. Our business development team is reporting a massive uptick in inbound inquiries. Meridian clients are asking about transition procedures. RFPs are flooding in. It's a feeding frenzy. Sebastian is panicking, I said, unfolding the linen napkin. He's trying to restore access he doesn't understand, but he doesn't have the regulatory knowledge. And why is that? Patricia Victoria leaned in. Why are the clients freezing? Institutional investors don't pause over a mid-level compliance officer getting terminated. I'm not mid-level. Victoria, I'm the single point of certification. They know that without me, the filings might fail. The audits might trigger. The regulatory flags might escalate to enforcement actions. I didn't tell them to freeze. I just told them I wasn't there to certify their compliance anymore. Self-preservation did the rest. The waiter arrived. I ordered a scotch. Neat. Victoria ordered Perrier. So, Victoria said, what do you want? A managing director title corner office. We can match your compensation plus 40%. I don't want a job. Victoria, I said, staring at her. I want autonomy. Explain. I want to build a division within Sterling. Institutional compliance services. I bring my book of business, my clients, my regulatory relationships, my trust. I run it my way. No interference from your director of client experience or whatever corporate decoration you have. I report to you, and only you. And if I say we need to file an amended certification to protect a pension fund, we file it. If I say we pay overtime to get an auditor on site during the holidays, we pay it. Victoria tapped her finger on the table. You're asking for a fiefdom. I'm offering you an empire. I corrected her. Meridian is hemorrhaging. By tomorrow morning, their major clients, the pension funds, the university endowments, the municipal retirement systems, they'll be looking for a lifeboat. I can be that lifeboat. But I captained the ship. Victoria smiled. It was a predatory smile. But I liked it. It was honest. Deal, she said. But you have to bring the State Street custody relationship with you immediately. We have a backlog. Done, I said. Give me a contract. While we were waiting for the entrees, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. Text. You leaked the account access. I know what you did. It was Sebastian. He'd moved from professional threats to personal accusations. I texted back. I didn't leak anything. I just didn't renew the compliance certification subscription. It expired at midnight. Should have checked the renewal calendar. I took a sip of scotch. It burned, but it was a good burn. Then a notification popped up that made my blood run cold. Alert SEC filing irregularity. Meridian Capital Partners. Quarterly form ADV showing material discrepancies. Potential enforcement action pending. My stomach dropped. Enforcement action. That was the filing variance I'd been correcting manually. The one I was working on when Sebastian interrupted me. The one that wasn't reconciled because I got fired before I could submit the amendment. I called Frank at the Allegheny Pension Fund immediately. He answered on the first ring. Patricia, tell me you saw it, Frank said. He sounded shaken. I saw the alert. Was it the allocation discrepancy? Yeah, but listen, it wasn't from our end. It was internal. Some junior analyst Sebastian hired off LinkedIn this morning tried to file the quarterly report without the proper reconciliation. They submitted numbers that don't match the actual fund positions. Oh my God, I whispered. The kid didn't know the calculation methodology. Patricia, they used the wrong formula for the beneficiary allocations, filed with the SEC showing a $200 million variance. The commission is opening an inquiry. This isn't just a freeze anymore. This is a federal investigation. I closed my eyes. This is what happens. This is the cost of arrogance. It's not just money. It's fiduciary duty. It's retirement security. Is the fund protected, I asked. They're working on it. But Meridian, they're done. Patricia, the SEC is going to suspend their registration. Mandatory immediate cessation of advisory activities. I looked at Victoria across the table. She saw the look on my face. What happened, she asked. Meridian just filed a fraudulent report. I said, material misstatement. Junior analyst without proper training. SEC is opening enforcement action. Victoria whistled low. The firm is going to liquidation. Sebastian doesn't just need a lawyer, I said, standing up. He needs a criminal defense attorney. I grabbed my briefcase. Where are you going? Victoria asked. We haven't signed the papers. Draw them up. I said. I have to go make sure none of my former colleagues get dragged down with the ship. And then I have to have a conversation with a very angry father, Old Man Whitmore. He lands in 3 hours, I said, checking the flight tracker I still had bookmarked for his private jet. And I'm going to meet him at the airport. This wasn't just business anymore. It was a rescue mission. I didn't go to the airport immediately. I went to the one place I knew Sebastian wouldn't think to look, but the people who actually mattered would find me. The archives. It wasn't a library. It was a secure storage facility in a warehouse district where Meridian kept physical copies of compliance records dating back to the founding. I had a key. I always had a key. I needed the original indemnity clauses signed by Old Man Whitmore, the ones that explicitly stated that regulatory compliance was the sole responsibility of the active CEO. I needed to prove that when I walked out, the chain of certification broke, and the negligence was 100% on Sebastian. I was digging through a box marked 2018 Fiduciary Protocols when the steel security door beeped. I didn't flinch. I knew who it was. You're trespassing. Patricia. I turned around. It was Martin Rhodes, Meridian's general counsel, 62 years old, suit that cost more than my car, eyes that had survived every regulatory investigation and felt nothing. It's not trespassing if I still have the access code. Martin, I said, holding up a file. And technically, I'm doing discovery for my own defense. Martin sighed and walked in. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his glasses before putting them back on. The SEC is at the headquarters, Martin said. They're imaging the servers. Sebastian is locked in his office with his personal attorney, literally barricaded. Patricia. Tiffany is giving an interview to Bloomberg about toxic workplace culture. It's grotesque. He hired an unqualified analyst for a regulatory critical filing. Martin. What did he expect? He expected you to fix it, Martin said quietly. He thought you were bluffing. He didn't realize that you were the compliance. I didn't break it, Martin. I said, my voice hard. I just stopped certifying it. I know, he said. That's why I'm here. The board is holding an emergency meeting tonight. They want to offer you a settlement, a large one, to come back and talk to the regulators, to say this was a miscommunication during a transition. I laughed. It echoed in the cold storage vault. A miscommunication. There's a material misstatement with the SEC. Pension fund allocations are wrong on federal filings. You want me to go under oath and say that's a miscalculation. We want you to save the firm, Martin said. For the employees, for Linda in the front office, for the junior analysts who don't know any better. I am saving them. I said, I'm moving them. I'm taking a position with Sterling. Martin, and I'm taking the good people with me. Martin's face fell. He knew what that meant. It was the death certificate, and Whitmore Martin asked, does he know? He knows the stock is worthless? He doesn't know why yet, but he lands in 90 minutes, and I'm going to be the one to tell him. He's going to blame you. Martin warned, he's a father first, a businessman second. He'll see this as betrayal. He can see it however he wants, I said, tucking the file into my briefcase. But he's going to listen to me. I walked past Martin. He didn't try to stop me. Patricia, he called out as I reached the door. I paused. That email regarding Section 8.3, he said. Brilliant. Ruthless, but brilliant. It tied my hands completely. I couldn't even threaten the clients legally because they were contractually obligated to pause. Read the fine print. Martin, I said. I wrote it. The private airfield was quiet. The sun was setting, leaving the sky a bruised gray. I parked near the fence, watching the runway lights flicker on. A Gulfstream G700 descended from the clouds, sleek and white. It touched down with a screech of tires. The founder was home. I waited by the gate. Old man Whitmore descended the stairs, phone pressed to his ear, shouting. He looked around for his driver. The driver wasn't there. The driver was probably stuck in the chaos at headquarters. Then he saw my Lexus. I rolled down the window. He stormed over, his cashmere coat flapping in the wind. You! He roared, pointing a finger at me. You disloyal, treacherous. Get in, Charles, I said, using his first name. I never used his first name. He stopped. The shock of it silenced him. Get in, I repeated. Your driver isn't coming. Sebastian fired the operations team, so nobody updated the arrival schedule. I'm the only one who knew you were landing early. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he opened the passenger door and climbed in. Start talking. He growled. I talked. For 50 minutes, I told him everything. The birthday party ultimatum, the firing, the client freeze, the SEC filing, the enforcement action. By the end, his face was ashen. How much, he asked finally. The enforcement action alone will cost 9 figures. Legal fees, regulatory fines, client lawsuits, restitution. You're looking at 300 million minimum, and that's before the firm liquidation. Charles stared out the windshield. My son, he said quietly. My idiot son. He didn't listen. Charles, I tried to warn him. He thought compliance ran itself. What do you want? Patricia Charles asked, turning to face me. You didn't come here for an apology. No, I said. I came here to make you an offer. The conversation with Charles lasted another hour. By the end, we had a deal. Sterling would acquire Meridian's institutional client relationships for fair market value. The employees would be offered positions. The pension fund obligations would be honored. Sebastian would be removed as CEO and face the legal consequences of his negligence, and I would lead the transition. 3 weeks later, my new office at Sterling has floor-to-ceiling windows. I can see the harbor from here. I can see the ships carrying the containers that represent the global economy I now help protect. Some of those accounts still carry Meridian allocations, but they have Sterling compliance certifications now. We're calling it the acquisition of the decade. The Wall Street Journal wrote an article about it. They called me the Iron Lady of Compliance. I hate it, but I framed it for my mother. Sebastian is facing federal charges. Rumors say Tiffany is testifying against him in exchange for immunity. She's launching a podcast about surviving toxic finance culture. I subscribed. It's hilarious. Charles is back in France. He sent me a case of Bordeaux. I haven't opened it. The pensioners kept their benefits. Frank from Allegheny sent me an enormous flower arrangement that required a hand truck to deliver. The card read, "To the guardian of fiduciary duty. The funds flow when you say flow." I sat at my desk, looking at the clean compliance dashboard on my monitors. No yellow warnings, no red flags, just green certifications. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Rebecca, who actually understands ERISA regulations, walked in. Mail call, Patricia. She dropped a stack of envelopes on my desk. I flipped through them. Client onboarding forms, thank you notes, and then a small cream envelope. It was from a law firm, Sebastian's attorneys. I opened it. A letter from Sebastian, typed. Not handwritten. Patricia. You think you won? You're just overhead. You'll always be overhead. I hope you enjoy your compliance reports. I looked at my sprawling corner office. I looked at the view of the empire I now helped command. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. He was a closed account, a liability I had written off. I picked up the letter. I walked over to the shredder. The cream paper turned into confetti. I walked back to my desk. My phone rang. It was Victoria. Patricia, we have a situation. Major pension fund is reporting allocation questions. We need a compliance review. I smiled. I'm on it. I said. I put on my headset. I pulled up the client files. The machine was humming, and I was the one holding the keys to the vault. Let's protect some retirements, I said to the empty room. And for the first time in 18 years, I didn't need the antacid. Thanks for watching. You spreadsheet warriors, hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're currently preparing for your sentencing hearing. Like, comment, share with anyone who's ever been told they were replaceable. Share with anyone who's ever been dismissed as overhead. Share with anyone who knows what it's like to be invisible until the moment invisibility becomes power, because there are always more stories where this came from. And somewhere out there, another invisible compliance officer is watching, waiting, documenting everything. The ledger always balances, even when management doesn't want it to, especially when management doesn't want it to.